Astoria Campaign Diary session recap for session 9. When we last left off, our party had just come to the edge of Serpent's Pass at the edge of the old world, this uncharted, ancient, lost, distant land. They had met this UNT human trafficking party, I guess, that was awaiting new, fresh meat, and they arrived, much to the surprise, our heroes, instead of what they expected was another wagon full of prisoners. So the fight broke out. Our heroes destroyed the UNT, and that is where we ended our session. So we pick back up, and night is beginning to fall. The sun is just going down over the edge of this cliff that they're standing against, and the party decides that before they continue up the pass, they're going to take a rest. So they only want to take a short rest because you can only do a long rest every so often in D&D. It's like 8 hours or something like that, or more than that, like I forget, it doesn't matter. But it hasn't been long enough. So they can take a short rest. So they go back down out of the pass a little bit, and when they do that, the illusory wall that they originally broke through kind of reappears, and solid wall is now again in front of them. They move back a ways into the dunes and set up a small camp to rest, keep an eye out while they're hanging out, because to short rest in D&D, you don't have to go to sleep, so they can all keep an eye out. And just to be safe, because Pax had heard that there were footsteps coming down the path. So Billy Bob Jr. pulls out some of the dynamite that he had bought back in Ravon across the desert, and he rigs a little trap, sets up like a kind of a striking surface, so that if they pull the rope, it's going to strike the match. He cuts the fuse real short, sets that up right against the wall, and they return to these dunes about 100 feet away to just kind of hide and take a rest. We rolled a couple times to see if any random desert things came across. Nothing appeared. So the party was successfully able to rest for an hour. They rolled some hit dice, gained some hit points back. A few people got some spell slots, and the sun sets and the moon rises above the desert, the golden sands. They reapproach the Serpent's Pass, where Pax once again cuts his hand and donates his blood into these bowls. The illusion disappears, and they begin making their way up this pass. Penelope, being a druid, the party divides this idea that they think there's probably someone still up there since no one came out. So she turned into a mouse, and she kind of is scouting ahead, maybe like 30 feet. This thing switchbacks up through this giant cliff. So it's like cut into the ground of the cliff. So it's just switchbacking up real steep. And so she goes forward, and the rest of the party is following behind her, staying within range of Pass Without a Trace, which she also casts on the party. So they're making their way up. And as they get higher and higher, this fog that was rolling over the hill is now pouring down into the pass. And the higher they get, the thicker the fog gets, until it gets to a point where they can only really make out the faint shadows of their allies and really hear them by the sound of their footsteps. Mateo has a telekinetic communication ability, which they're using a lot in this campaign, which is helping them stay quiet. Billy Bob Jr. makes a perception check and hears the heartbeats of these cultists, and they are hidden against the walls of this length of the pass, and they're just hiding in the fog with their daggers out. Now the party rolled insanely high on their stealth, like high 20s, and so somehow, some way, they sneak past this group of cultists in this tight space without actually being detected, and they make their way all the way up successfully to the top of this cliff with these 7 detected cultists behind them. As they step out over the top, Penelope is the first one to come up, but she's still a mouse, and she ends up staying a mouse for a while. And as she comes up, all she can really see is the fog, but the rest of the party eventually catches up, and they step out and kind of up over the fog to where they see there's this vast clearing in front of them where the fog is about knee high and just kind of rolling along the ground. And there's these weird reptilian vulture creatures, which the party is very wary of originally, but they soon find that they really pose no threat. These appear to be like scavenger birds, and they're just kind of flying around. They look like big vultures, but without feathers. And they're just pecking at the ground. And then way up in front of them, like 90, 100 feet, is this thick, dense, and dark jungle. And it's just a curtain of black. And that is the old world that the group is heading towards. So they see this and they're peering into the woods and not really seeing anything. They move up a little bit very quietly, still using this pass without a trace to kind of hide amongst the fog and the mist, not to disturb it too much. Someone makes a perception check and they see their like little pairs of eyes like glowing just barely against the moonlight, almost like how cat's eyes glow in the moonlight. And they stop in their tracks like 60 feet away from this jungle, and suddenly they hear coming up behind them are what sound like the cultists. And they hear them talking, and the cultists are like, we shouldn't have waited till the moon came up. Like, we're screwed. What are we going to do now? And they hear them saying this stuff. The party's trying to decide what to do. Eventually, Penelope climbs up on Mateo's shoulder. Pax and Gaston are just kind of holding at the ready with their weapons. And there's a little bit of an impasse until Billy Bob Jr. pulls another stick of dynamite out, lights it, and then rolls it through the fog towards these 7 cultists. And I believe he like covered it up under like his coat when he lit it and rolled it down in the fog. All of a sudden you hear a brief scream and a huge explosion. And 2 things happen at once. First of all, these cultists like explode. They don't all die, but they get gravely injured. Arrows start flying out of the forest, this jungle. Now, it's not your normal just like hail of arrows. These are accurate shots, and the party will soon find this out. So we roll initiative. The cultists, they kind of panic and they just make a break for the jungle, for the tree line. And the party is kind of split at this moment between doing the same or turning back and going back down the pass. At initiative count 20, these arrows fly out, and whoever is shooting these is super accurate. So the only way these guys will miss is if they roll a natural 1. And they are like aiming at the cracks in the armor, the little spaces in between, and they're hitting everyone except, of course, for Pax, because Pax somehow, I rolled 3 natural 1s over the course of this combat. Did not hit Pax a single time. Absolutely insane. So they're taking out these cultists. Gaston is just pounding them left and right, and Pax as well is cutting them down pretty easily, moving. Everyone's got a second attack now, so they're moving from guy to guy and just cutting them down. So during this combat, the party seems split between running back to the pass, and Mateo and Penelope. Penelope, like as a mouse on Mateo's shoulder, has been running towards the jungle. When they turn around and see the rest of the group is running back down the pass, there's a little bit of miscommunication and confusion there that causes Mateo to have to take a few more hits from the arrows, as well as the rest of the group just be scrambling around in the clearing for a while. One thing Mateo does get a good sight on, though, having had run ahead, is his dancing lights, which he is constantly using as a form of illumination in darkness. And sending these forward into the tree line, he discovers that these figures, they appear to be elves, like druidic elves. They wear these long horned antlers and like old like fur skin robes and stuff. And he gets a good glimpse at them before he sees that the rest of the party has run back, decides to turn back and do the same. So they take out all of these cultists. They get out of range of the arrows, and they are not pursued out of the jungle. But they've taken quite a bit of a beating just from the arrows and fighting the cultists. So they decide to go back down the pass and try to take a long rest. Now, this is a bit of a sketchy place to do this. Normally they would be attacked, but they took out the backup cultists that were coming to defend or assist Dinesha, and they do find over the course of this long rest that these druids do not leave the forest. So they get a long rest and they wake up in the morning. Pax makes a Constitution saving throw against his bloodthirst. He does succeed on it, but they had dragged one of these cultists back down the pass, questioned him briefly before killing him, and when they woke up in the morning, Pax just decided to go ahead and drink some of this guy's blood before it went bad. And when he drinks human blood, the DC resets down to 12. Basically what happens is if each long rest, Pax has to make a saving throw against this stuff, his thirst. If he passes, the DC goes up by 1. And if he fails, he has to go drink something, or he'll suffer negative effects. But if he drinks the blood of a humanoid, that resets the DC back down to 12. So that's just kind of the way we're doing mechanics on it. So he sees this fresh body here, goes ahead and feeds. The party's very open-minded, very progressive in this sense. So they've all got their quirks, and they are totally cool with Pax. As long as he's not sucking their blood, it's all good. So he satiates his thirst, and they decide that it is now time to move into the jungle. It is now morning. The sun has come up. I believe at this point we are on day 6. I am tracking this for a reason, partly just because it's fun to know how long your campaign actually goes, but for another reason too. And so they awaken, gather all their things, and begin making their way to the forest. As they come up over the pass again, the fog is much thinner in the sunlight, kind of getting burned away. Still does roll out from the jungle. But coming up over the top, they do not get attacked by arrows, and they make their way through the tree line into the dense jungle. Now, as we move through the jungle, basically what I had here were a few encounters planned out, and I basically had the party roll for. I picked someone in the party. I believe Gaston's player rolled to see what they would run into first, and it just so happened that they first ran into a druid circle. Now, these assumed are the druids that were shooting them the night before. So they're very wary of the situation. But fortunately, Penelope, being a druid, is the only person who is able to distinguish the carvings and symbols that are actually carved into these stones. It's like a small Stonehenge in a small clearing in this dense jungle. So Penelope reads these, and they're basically instructions on how to position yourself within this stone circle. So she sees this and finds the position in the facing direction, and she goes and stands in that position. And as she does, if you've ever seen those weird sculptures that look like jumbled junk, and then when you move to a certain angle, they like turn into a face or something like that, that is what happens in the trees. And suddenly a tunnel that ascends up into the canopy suddenly comes into view. And it seems like an illusion, but as she walks further into it, she does find that, yes, indeed, you do step up into these steps and rise up into the canopy. This is a secret entrance to the druid's village. She shows this to the rest of the party before going up by herself. I believe Gaston was the second one, and then the rest of the party followed behind. And they creep slowly up this path. Gaston switches around to the front because he's got a lot of armor. They're figuring if we're about to go into battle, we should be ready, have our big shields up front. So Gaston peeks his head up over the top of this little stairway, and he sees this treetop village, and they're the druids. All the druids are up there. They are kind of this is their home, so they're hanging out. There's little druid children, little elves running around. They're crafting bows, sharpening blades. Gaston kind of comes up and he greets himself, and the druids freak out. All of them jump to attention. They pull their bowstrings. They're ready to kill. Gaston tries to talk to them. They don't seem to understand what he's saying. Penelope runs up and speaks in Druidic as they hear they hear the druids speaking in Druidic, and so she speaks to them and tells them, we're not here to hurt you. We're cool. We're friends. Blah blah blah. Eventually, this head druid, the one that Mateo had seen the night before with the dancing lights, she She wears these big like elk antlers, and like this kind of like, like deer skin kind of fabricy thing. If you listen to the band Heilung, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you don't, Heilung, go check them out right now. Anyway, that's what these druids look like. And this one steps in front and introduces herself. She tells all of her people to kind of drop their arrows. She says, I am Anwana. And she says this in Druidic. So only Penelope can understand her. But they begin talking. And they basically tell the druids that they're not here to hurt them. They're here to try to find out what's going on with this human trafficking situation. They were almost prisoners themselves, almost victims themselves, so they want to try to find the root of this problem and fix it. They find out in the course of conversation with Anwana that these Yuan Ti have indeed been becoming way more active than they used to, and that they were basically an extinct civilization, but suddenly they popped back up and they're growing in strength. So the party questions them about this name on this missive that they had received, that they found on Blacktooth or Dead Tooth in session 1, and also Vlarg, the hobgoblin guy that they killed back in Ravon. They both had the same letter, and both were signed by Sin. Anwana knows this name that's been passed down through the oral traditions. She kind of hints that the Yuan Ti and the druids of this forest have had like a blood feud for like a millennia, but the Yuan Ti have basically all been wiped out. So she knows this name, but this guy Sin, he was an old king of the Yuan Ti, like 1,000 years ago, and he died sometime in the past after like a very successful tyrannical reign, but he died. So the party was kind of like, they must be trying to resurrect this guy. So they ask Anwana if she would be willing to help. Normally we would do a persuasion check for this, but looking around, Anwana sees that her people are scared and most of her village has been decimated. I believe it was either Pax or Billy Bob Jr. Make an insight check into the situation with this village, and they see that the village is much larger than the population of people who inhabit it. So that leads them to believe that a lot of them have probably been wiped out. This is confirmed in Penelope's discussions with Anwana, and she, being kind of their de facto, kind of their leader, she agrees to, yes, if you're going to make a move, I'm going to come help. So Anwana gathers her things. The party begins to head back down to the druid circle, and Penelope, being a druid, she's fascinated by the ancient history and these ancient druidic magics that are really in the modern world are forgotten to time. So in a kind of meta sense, because unfortunately Penelope's player is not at the table anymore, this was her last session. So Penelope stayed in this village, and she kind of stayed behind to learn the ways of the druid, to deeper connect, with her past and her history. So Penelope stays behind. The rest of the party moves on, and they take Anwana with her, and they head back down into the jungle. Now, Anwana is a denizen of this jungle. She grew up here, so she knows the area pretty well. So she's serving as a guide, and she knows where the temple is. So she's going to assist the party in getting closer and finding their way to this temple. So they begin moving forward, and we roll a d4. The group asks how many days walk is this, and I'm like, all right, let's roll. Let's see how long this is going to take. We roll, get a 1, so it is less. It's like a day at most away, which was, everyone had huge relief on their faces, but it's not going to be too long. We're going to be able to make it in a day if we move quickly. The party suddenly hears the marching of footsteps. They hear this sound. The earth is almost like quaking. It was funny because Billy Bob Jr.'s player, Hippie, he mentioned dinosaurs at the beginning of the session, and I was just like, stop guessing stuff, please. But sure enough, they take cover behind like a tree stump, and a group of like 5 allosaurs, which are like almost like tiny T-Rexes, something between like a velociraptor and a T-Rex, with these berserker dwarves riding on their backs, just like chanting like a just come marching, like riding off to war or something, and they just come plowing through this path. And fortunately the party's like hidden away. They're not sure what to do, but eventually they do decide to just let them pass, and they are not detected by the dwarves. So the dwarves just ride through and then ride away on these dinosaurs into the jungle to do who knows what. They let this situation pass and they continue forward again. They travel for a few more hours until suddenly something comes into view that does not belong. Anwana is confused because she had not seen this the last time she was in this area of the jungle. But sure enough, there is a ship crashed in this jungle. And this is not like almost looks like a sailing vessel, like a boat, but it's made out of like metals. It's got like glass windows on it. It's almost like a submarine looking thing with a big sail on top. And this thing completely out of place in this ancient world, let alone medieval fantasy period. Like this strange craft has crashed in this jungle. Billy Bob Jr. immediately, being a gift from the astral sea, breaks out of the group and runs up towards the ship. A voice calls out from the ship as he approaches, saying not to take another step further, or else they're going to see the business end of this guy's musket. This guy's going on, someone is in this ship, and they're going on about raiders and how if they get any closer, he's going to fire on them. But Billy Bob Jr. pulls out his pistol and fires it into the air. And slowly, out from the ship, peeks another GIF that looks just like Billy Bob Jr. And he creeps out and introduces himself. He's wearing like safari clothes. He's got this big monocle, this musket that he's holding, and sees Billy Bob Jr. is overjoyed to see someone of his own kind out here in the middle of nowhere. They all run up and they begin talking. And this guy, Roger, basically tells the party that he was on a hunting expedition with his friends. They crashed in this jungle when they went out hunting. When they went out hunting for supplies, they killed a few things, but they got in deep with like some vicious wild creatures. And when they came back, Roger and a few of his friends came to find that the power cell of their ship, it's an arcane cell, had been stolen, and they were stranded. And over the next few days, weeks, these pygmy raiders, as he had called them, these tiny little frogmen, had been assaulting the ship, and he was now the only one left alive. And he was low on ammo, low on food, basically at the verge of the end. And he was just happy to see a friendly face. So they're talking. Billy Bob Jr. is very willing to help. The rest of the party isn't so sure. The guy's basically asking, can you help me find this arcane cell so I can get off this rock? And they're going back and forth trying to figure out what to do, when suddenly the party picks up bright colored little tiny frog people surrounding and marching in on the camp. They clearly were alerted by that gunshot, and they are moving in for the attack. We roll initiative, and that is where we ended session 9. Now, we've already played session 10, so I'll be recording that one shortly, maybe in like 10 minutes. But yeah, session 9 was a blast. We have finally made our way into the old world, and the party is becoming dangerously close to the source of all this pain and terror that is being wrought upon the land of Astoria. So that's pretty much it. No takeaways this week, but there's definitely going to be some next week. It's not that I don't learn anything. It's just that I don't have anything I feel is, wise enough to try to preach on the people. So just had a good old fun session. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to my players. We carry on our heroic journey into the jungles. Y'all be good out there. See you next time. Peace.